Hey, it's Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I want to thank all of the expert moderators and panelists for being a part of these Insight Jam discussions today. The launch of InsightJam.com has been incredibly rewarding with all of the contributions we're receiving from the experts and solution providers and end users. It's really been quite a sight to see. If you haven't joined InsightJam.com already, please do. And if you have, please invite some of your colleagues to join as well. And again, thanks very much for being here and enjoy today's discussions.
Solutions Review presents Insight Jam, a social media community for enterprise technology. Hello and welcome back to Insight Jam Live. My name is Jonathan Paula. We continue our mini jam festivities with our second and final panel of the day, Bridging the AI Divide, Upskilling Strategies for Enterprise Software Teams. I'm joined once again by a great group of experts from around the world. John, Anders, Donald, Paul, and Vinnie, thank you so very much for joining me. I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited to hear the discussion over the next 60 minutes or so. So let's start things off with some introductions. John, you've agreed to moderate, so I'll let you go first. 30 seconds or so, tell the audience a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. John Santaferraro from Ferraro Consulting. I've been around the data and analytics industry for about 30 years now, long time. I mean, we were talking about crystal reports when I began, and now we're talking about AI. I've done a little bit of everything from vendor marketing to chief analytics officer to industry analyst, as I am doing today. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Thanks for moderating. Appreciate it. Anders, over to you.
Hello, Anders Green. I'm with Alox ERP, which is a cloud ERP for distribution. I started off in electrical engineering, but even then did some language models and neural networks all the way back in research in grad school, vision and some genetics. Got into distribution, and then now I'm back into technology again. So I'm happy to be here on the panel.
Thank you, and glad to have you on the panel. Next up is Donald.
Oh, thanks very much. I'm Donald Farmer, and I have my own independent consulting company, TreeHive Strategy. I'm really a product guy. I spent years at Microsoft building data mining products there, and I was at Click building their second generation technology. But now I'm independent, advising software vendors and enterprises and investors all around the world on data and analytics strategy.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. Next up, Paul. Welcome back. How are you?
Hi guys, Paul Byrne. I've been doing ERP and all sorts of different technology for more than 30 years. We set up Dragon ERP just under 2 years ago. The three founding members have got 95 years ERP implementation experience, and it's all going very, very well so far.
Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Vinnie.
Thank you. It's great to be part of this panel. And unlike the others, I started my career in accounting. I actually had a CPA, which I gave up a few years later. And I've had a career with Pricewaterhouse, then Gartner, the research firm, and now my own firm, where I continue to do analysis. I'm also an author. I'm also an advisor. And, this AI stuff, it's got so many different dimensions. Looking forward to this panel. And I'm going to bring out two books that I've written, one about 8 years ago called Silicon Collar, and one that's about to come out called The AI Analyst. So looking forward to this.
Excellent. Well, thank you one and all again for joining me. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'm going to step out of the way now. John, I'll let you take things over and begin with our first question and introduction.
Awesome. Big welcome, everyone. We are covering one of the hottest topics for every organization around the world. According to the Data Camp report on the state of data and AI literacy, 3 of the top 5 fastest growing, most important upskilling priorities were data skills. That includes business intelligence, data science, of course, with its core emphasis in AI, and basic data literacy skills. Interesting, 85% of the respondents agreed that organizations must invest in lifelong learning for their workforce to adapt to this new era of data literacy. Let's jump in. Vinnie, we'll start with you. In your opinion and experience, what are some of the pillars of a successful upskilling strategy?
Well, let me be a little bit contrarian and say, you mentioned the point continuous learning. This area is growing, changing so rapidly, right? 24 months ago, LLMs were the hottest thing. Now in the enterprise, I'm starting to hear, maybe LLMs are not right for us. Small language models might be better, right? So it's changing almost overnight. Second, the reality is customers have way more data and knowledge than do vendors. And we tend to get all our messaging from vendors. So when we talk about learning, we need to be careful. Upskilling, we need to be careful and not just focus on what we're getting from vendors. So I think there are a lot of dimensions. Clearly, everyone needs to learn what's changing, but we need to be a little humble about how much we really know in the vendor world. Give you an example. No pharmaceutical company is going to share molecular data with any vendor. No oil company is going to share seismic data with any vendor. Coca-Cola is never going to share its formula with any of us. So those are just small examples of stuff vendors will never see. There's so much operational data that we don't have access to, and if we had access to, we don't have the practitioners who understand how to apply it. So that's one perspective we need to bear in mind.
Great. Thanks, Vinnie. Donald, I'm going to jump over to you. What are some of the pillars of a successful upskilling strategy?
I think we have to think about what the motivations for upskilling are. And I think two of the pillars that are sometimes overlooked about upskilling is it must be aligned with your strategic objectives. You're not just upskilling for the sake of it, you're upskilling because there's a strategic need to upskill. And so the specific skills that you enable people with should be aligned with your strategic business goals. That'll give you value, and ultimately it gives them value as well. There's a whole set of other skills that they can learn in their own time, in their own way, and as an adjacency to your core skills that you're looking for, but you need to align those with your strategic business goals, which also means that it's got to be tailored learning. You align the skills not only with the strategic goals, but also with the specific roles that people are in. And so if somebody is working, as an administrator, they will be upskilled in skills that are appropriate. Other people who work in analytics will be upskilled in a different way. So you need to align the skills with the job roles, and you need to align the skills with the business objectives. Once you get all that in place, I think you have a much better platform for doing your upskilling. But I think of these as being the primary pillars. It's a pillar of alignment with your strategy, with the goals of your job roles, and of course, once you upskill people in this way, or you enable them to upskill themselves, then you also, of course, increase the benefit to employees generally. So, let's get focused about it, and make sure that we're actually achieving something with this.
Yeah, role-based is a great concept. Paul, what about you? What would you add?
The first thing I would say is actually having a strategy for upskilling. Many organizations don't. They let people learn on their own. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, saying that AI is still in its infancy. Yeah, it's been around for a long time, but from where it's at, and organizations have been running lean for a number of years. They suddenly think that they can just flick a switch and it'll be on, and that they don't need to train people. So if I go back to the classic thing that the CFO says to the CEO, if we train them, they might leave. And the CEO goes back and says, well, if we don't train them, they might stay. So that applies to AI as everything else. So having a strategy and aligning that, what Donald said, with your vision, your strategy, and, well, getting a strategy first.
Yeah, awesome. Anders, I know you've got something to add. Bring it.
Well, I think, Donald get a key point, which is it has to be targeted. We're still in an era where getting people not to click on obvious spam in their email is a problem for the IT department. And if you're going to imagine that there's a corporate thing, you're like, okay, everybody, go learn AI. Like, if you've got an organization with 120, 200 people, that is not going to fly because, the difference between the person you have doing analytics, in the office on the 14th floor versus the person doing mail in the first floor, what they need to get out of it is totally different. So I think a key aspect of this is saying that we can't have one AI training course that the whole company needs to go through. That wouldn't work for any corporation. So it's going to be identifying the key aspects of the roles that you have and saying, for a developer, what do they need to do? For an executive, what do they need to do? For someone in marketing, what is their application? And each one of those is going to have possibly different restrictions about what data they might want to submit to those. And is it a private cloud or internal, public? Each is going to be different for everybody.
John, one other thing I'd add is, the definition of the enterprise. All of us live in the white collar world. We tend to look at digital technologies as the end goal. We forget the physical world allows for a lot of robotics, drones, autonomous vehicles, and so on. Frankly, a lot of exciting stuff is happening right there that affects manufacturing, R&D, warehouses, and so on. That's part of the enterprise too. Sometimes we just focus on the back office, finance, HR, and forget that the enterprise is much bigger and automation is much more than AI. Humanoid robots are probably the most exciting thing if you talk to robotic people around the world, right? So we need to be careful not to just focus on digital white collar stuff.
Great addition, Vinnie. I think that the program itself as well. It's got to have some basics too, right? Executive sponsorship, business sponsorship. There's got to be measurement. There's got to be experimentation. There's, it really isn't just literacy, but AI literacy is certainly an important part of upskilling.
Sure.
So, what are your thoughts about what it takes to implement an effective AI literacy program, the literacy itself? I like the data camp breakdown of some of the necessary elements of a successful AI literacy program. It includes communicating using data in AI, reading or interpreting data in AI, reasoning with data in AI, and working with the data itself. So it's a combination of skills and literacy. But what are your thoughts on what it takes to implement an effective AI literacy program? Donald, I'm gonna start with you. I know this is an area that is dear to your heart.
It really is, and thanks for coming to me, because for me, literacy is fundamentally important, and I'm actually very interested in conventional literacy, reading and writing literacy. I've spent a lot of my time working with adult literacy nonprofits, so I quite often have a different view of literacy. And the key thing about literacy for me is to understand the difference between personal literacy, whether I understand things and can read and write, for example, or can work with AI, and organizational literacy, which is actually a little bit different. Can our organization benefit from AI? And does our organization understand how to use AI, in this case, to its best advantage? And those are fundamentally different. You can have an individual person who's literate, and it would be like the Middle Ages, only a few people are literate and the rest of society isn't. Or you can have a situation as we have today in the West, where a large number of people are literate, and therefore society functions differently. So when we look at AI literacy, it may actually be better to increase the overall literacy of the organization by a little bit, rather than having an isolated elite of a few people who are highly AI literate. Now, of course, you probably want a mix of those things, but I really want to think about literacy in these different ways. The organizational literacy, where everybody understands enough to be able to communicate and to be able to exchange ideas and information and to learn from AI. And this personal literacy, where a smaller number of people may be deeply literate about these subjects, but the rest of the people are ignorant. We will do better most often by increasing the overall organizational literacy. Does that make sense if I put it that way?
Yeah. And Anders, do you want to jump in?
Well, I think if we look at literacy as a skill, and I think the difficult part with when we say AI and people need to learn about it is if you say this is a tool and it can do a thing, and the difficult part for many people is imagining, well, what can it actually do? Like if I said, here's a backhoe, everyone would say, well, you can dig a hole. It's not immediately obvious to people to say, you could also put out a fire by getting water from a pool next door. You could use that to pull another vehicle out of a thing. So a skilled operator with a backhoe has 50 things that he can do that is not digging a hole. And I think the challenge with AI is you're like, oh, I learned it. Well, do you have an idea of what you could do with that outside of, I want it to write this story? That is, I think, the more difficult part is broadening people's minds as far as, could I use it for X? Could I use it for Y? When the very narrow use cases that we're taught, pretty straightforward. And I think part of that is going to be, maybe going to some conferences or some lectures, but also meeting with some of the super skilled AI users and hanging out with them, some collaboration and getting an idea of like, holy cow, I never thought that you would use this to pick colors or whatever you're doing. And that I think is a critical part of it, is expanding your own imagination once given the tool itself.
Yeah, Paul, I'm gonna throw it over to you because you live in a very specific world, right? And do a lot with SAP. So bringing applications together into this world of AI literacy, what are your thoughts?
So SAP's stated goal is to go wall-to-wall AI, but I think that's every ERP's stated goal. They're not there yet. They're talking a good talk, and people are learning, unfortunately, by themselves. And we've only got to look at the results that are coming out on LinkedIn and stuff. I think it's the increase of AI generated content has just been exponential in the last 12 months. And it's a lot of it's junk. Where I'm going with that is that says that people are learning by themselves and using it the wrong way. So if we're going to use it across the board with your ERP systems, we have to train people. We have to show them how to use it. If I just join a company tomorrow and I need to create a sales order, I'm going to start fiddling around in Word trying to create it. And the AI should say, oh, it looks like you're trying to create a sales order. It should automatically bring me from Word through Teams, for example, and then directly into SAP and go, here you go. Here's the template for that. And Microsoft Copilot, and this is like a use case scenario, should be able to hand over between Copilot and Joule or any other AI to to empower the human, not the other way around.
Yeah. John, I would say, if you're talking about literacy and being humble, right? Telling people, look, generative AI is the hot new thing. But AI goes all the way back to Alan Turing, right? It goes all the way back to HAL, 2001 Space Odyssey. So giving people a historical perspective is always useful. Second, when it comes to generative AI, we talk about use cases. And people like Paul and me, because we're in the application world, we talk about use cases a little too much. I find helping people understand what happens behind the scenes. What does an LLM do? What does a GPU do? Why is NVIDIA so successful, etc.? Giving them the whole architectural flow is extremely important because people just don't seem to understand how complex the whole process is. When you put in a prompt in ChatGPT, breaks it down into tokens. Tokens get converted into vectors. Vectors get multiplied by weights. I mean, the amount of processing that is going on, the amount of energy that's taking. Most people don't even realize how complex this whole thing is. Now, you may say that'll intimidate some people, but if you're trying to make them literate, I think it's useful to expose them to all this.
Yeah, I think that a couple of you have alluded to this, but a big part of upskilling and literacy is experimentation. It's equally as important to get that hands-on experience with AI applications and learn as they're using. So what are your thoughts on how to set up a sandbox so users can get hands-on experience? I mean, how do people do it? What guardrails should be in place? What's a balance? Anders, I'm gonna let you kick this off.
Well, I think that the battle here is going to be between the IT guys that want to deploy this already and maybe already deployed it without telling anybody, and your back end, your training core that is like, we do not have any materials prepared for this, and we haven't loaded up our exact models and documentation into the back end of this language model. So I think part of it is going to be a little bit of restraint, and I think we've seen this maybe a little bit in the industry where everybody and LinkedIn was mentioned for AI generated content where it's got the button right down at the bottom, rewrite this post with AI, and you're kind of like, maybe we shouldn't in certain areas promote it that heavily if we don't want people to be lazy. So I think that's the deployment is going to be a little bit it's maybe a little rash at the moment. Maybe we need a little more strategy. So do you need to get this deployed in the next 14 days? Probably not. Maybe we can wait 6 weeks and try to have it a little more organized.
Awesome. Vinnie, any insight on how to set up a sandbox or how to promote experimentation in a healthy way in an organization?
I think, I think training is always audience specific, right? So for end users, I could see a sandbox which is specific to use cases. Give them an exposure to what is happening behind the scenes, but focus on the particular use case and their role in the use case, right? But honestly, the literacy needs to go up the organization too. I am just shocked at how much money is being spent by executives who really don't understand what they're getting for the money, right? That kind of literacy involves looking at how much data is available to machines, who's it available from, why is processing, why are GPUs so expensive, why are they taking so much energy, and so on. I think that is a much more sophisticated level of training that we need to prepare executives for. I'm shocked at how much money is being spent with very poor payback. And it's because the literacy is coming from reading magazines, not from proper exposure to all the elements of investment and operational needs.
Vinnie, you mentioned power requirements, and I saw just recently that that Microsoft was looking at restarting 3 Mile Island and getting nuclear power plants to power their AI data centers. Do you think that there could be increased costs in the future when the source companies like OpenAI stop subsidizing the usage, and we actually have to pay for the power that we're using?
Well, there is a contrarian trend also starting, and I'm encouraged by this. I think people are realizing we don't need LLMs and GPUs for everything. Okay, smaller models are able to do a lot more. I mean, think about composable applications we've been talking about, right? The composable applications are making us think in terms of small objects, not giant ERP solutions, right? Something similar is happening in the language model thinking, which is LLMs are great, but not every, it's a big hammer for small nails quite often. So we need smaller models. And those will bring us back to, we don't need very, very hungry LLMs for everything. So I think a contrarian view is we kind of balance it out. We may have to start worrying about EVs sucking up our power as much as AI. Right now, it looks like AI.
I want to bring back the discussion to this idea of experimentation and what, Donald, I'm going to ask you, is like, well, what kind of guardrails do you need to put on? How far do you open it up to the organization? Can everybody just start playing with AI? What do you suggest?
This is a really important point about sandboxes. People think of sandboxes as being like a free-for-all. We just open this up and anyone can do it. My neighbors have a sandbox. They have a sandbox in their garden for their kids to play in. Before they let their kids play in it, they have to make sure the raccoons haven't pooped in it, and then they can let the kids play in it. I'm not quite sure where that metaphor is going, but it's going somewhere. But I think the mistake is to think that the sandbox is just a free-for-all. And it's a dangerous mistake for a couple of reasons. One very important one is that under an increasing amount of consumer protection law and the sort of law that you get in the US and California, but increasingly, of course, in Europe with GDPR, there are usage restrictions on how data can be used. It's not about access to data. You can have access to data, but you still can't use it for certain purposes. So even with a sandbox where you want people to experiment, you have to be careful that they're not using the data for certain purposes. So there's a degree of education and a degree of governance that has to go into the sandbox. It's not a free-for-all. And then the other thing we need to make sure is that we understand that the experiments are experiments. In other words, the sandbox may be for experimentation, but there is a subtle difference between experimentation and prototyping. Prototyping is an early stage of something which you intend to go into production. Experimentation comes before prototyping, which is where we're trying to discover things which may ultimately become a prototype. And I really worry that sometimes we jump from experimentation, especially with AI, we're jumping from experimentation to production without going through this really important stage of prototyping, which is where you actually sort out some of the problems about privacy and security, but also some of these issues that Vinnie was raising about, say, power consumption and so on. Data engineers will tell you that some of the models that they are brought to them to put into production are far too expensive to run. You tweak them slightly and they become far lower cost. I think we've all seen people have, the Amazon or Google bills that become astronomical because somebody's done a full table scan of their largest data warehouse. And, they end up with multi-$1,000 bills. So you have to think about it in three stages. There's experimentation in the sandbox, there's prototyping, and there's ultimately production. And if you think of the sandbox as being this early stage.
Yeah, great delineation. Paul, I don't know, maybe you can kind of enlighten us as well, because I'm wondering, are there some specific areas that are better for sandbox experimentation that you would recommend? Like where should people really start opening up AI for use by their company?
I know this is not directly on our agenda, but first I'm going with Donald here, and there's the AI ethics, right? And looking at the data that's going to come out, and what Vinnie said earlier about, Boeing is not going to let its latest jet engine technology get out on the and share it with competitors. The same with any pharma, same with Coca-Cola. All of those examples that Vinnie gave, that's not going to happen. But is that going to happen in the sandbox environment? And is it going to escape by accident? And again, back to what Vinnie was saying, is the lack of maturity in the organizations of what they're expecting out of AI and where is it going to go. So it's all, if we just look at the general lack of maturity in most organizations on their project management and project delivery, just deliver it, and then, are we going to do the same with AI? Not train people, let people just get on with stuff. And if I just go back to my earlier point about a lot of the junk that's coming out, people are doing searches on AI. They're not reading the results, they're just posting them. If we look a little bit further and go, reading articles this week, I've read that feel free to ignore Gen AI. It's a new kind of software development. A new software developer is being born. So we're not even there yet. And that's from the maturity level. People are messing with Python and whatever. That's where we need to control it and go back again to what Vinnie said, the use cases. So is there a specific area? I don't know.
Yeah. But maybe some practical examples, right? Let's switch gears a little bit. You guys have all been involved probably in some kind of upskilling program that you've implemented, or you have experience with customers that are doing it right. What are some of the things that you've seen that are working for upskilling programs? What are companies that you're working with doing? What have you seen successful on your projects? And Paul, let's begin with you.
Unfortunately, we're not seeing a lot from the upskilling side of things. We're just, the JFDI methodology, just get on, just freaking do it. Learn as you go. And that's really bad. Again, going back to my point is that people don't realize how powerful this thing can possibly be.
Yeah.
That's worrying.
Yeah. Anders, any hands-on experience that you've had, things that you see working?
Well, the thing that I see that's sort of been most adopted within the ERP space is a lot of the automatic recognition of incoming purchase orders or invoices. And that is a pretty small subset to let a piece of AI do the field matching and programming of having those automatically processed. I've seen adoption of that go pretty well because it's quite accurate and it's usually built into the back end of other tools. So that's usually something that the corporation can put into place, and then everyone sort of benefits on the back end without a lot of training. So that one's done well. I think it's difficult because there's still engineering and research going on into integrating all of these solutions with our existing products.
So,
John,
can I challenge there?
John, we should probably touch on a societal issue that comes into the workplace also, which is any automation is viewed as a labor replacement, right? So people are skittish about signing up for new stuff, AI stuff, any automation, because they think, I'm just teaching the damn machine to replace my job. Okay. The history of automation in general, that's the first book that I wrote, Silicon Collar, 8 years ago, looked at 50 different occupations. And we looked at all kinds of drones and UAVs and AI and scanning machines and so on. In general, automation always targets what's called dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks. Okay, so when we go into any kind of sandbox or whatever, I think we need to be careful and tell users, hey, look at all the tedious stuff you're doing. This is going to replace that. Don't worry about your high-level intellectual cognitive tasks. Those are not going to be affected. I think that's part of the training we need to be carefully designing, rather than just allowing people to go use what's available in the sandbox.
Yeah, Donald, how about you? What are you seeing out there? I know you've run a couple of AI literacy workshops. What's going on?
Yeah, there's a point that Vinnie makes about people being worried about their jobs, and in my workshops, which have typically been with executives, to be fair. But one of the things I emphasize, and one of the things they've done, having come out of the workshop and gone back to their workplace, is to engage with people directly. In other words, we can actually think of AI as just as much being a bottom up as a top down process. You can go to your booking clerks. You can go to people on the factory floor, present them with AI and say, what do you think? What do you think of this? How can this make you better? I've done a couple of what we call 20 questions kind of projects. Sometimes we don't even get to 20, but we sit down, take an hour, and we take a business report, we take a working report, we might take a status report from a factory. You can do all sorts of things. And you just ask a question. And you start with that question and you put it into the LLM, and we start having a conversation with an LLM about the state of the business. And it's absolutely fascinating. You can be talking with people who are, working in a shop. They can be working on the shop floor in a factory. They can be working in the back office, and they become fascinated by this. And they start to see AI not as a risk to them, but they actually see AI as a complement to their work. And this is bottom up. This is talking about the lowest paid workers in the company and working all the way up to the executives, rather than thinking as AI that's something going to be brought down from on top and mandated to people. So if people are worried about this, the number one thing you can do is, as always in human relationships, engage people and get involved in that conversation with them. And you know what? They see the creativity, they see the excitement, and they actually sometimes see it much more than the executives and managers can see it. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, let's talk about this top-down approach, right? I mean, what do you how do you educate executives on the use of AI? I mean, right now, all of the education that they're getting is primarily coming from vendors, right? So so they're getting is like one perspective from each vendor trying to sell their own stuff. What do you all recommend in terms of educating executives about AI?
John, I want to slightly disagree with you. I see in a number of industries, at least the bigger, more sophisticated ones, there's a clear recognition that the vendor world only meets 85% of our technology needs. Okay, when you look at vertical capabilities, when you look at geographic around the world capabilities, most vendors don't have it. Okay, they have a lot of back office. As somebody told me, as an executive told me, he says, Vinnie, the vendor world has handled my SG&A expenses extremely well. HR, finance, procurement, back office stuff. He says, when it comes to cost of goods sold, we do a lot of that ourselves. The operational stuff is done by us. The data is ours, right? So I think many executives I talk to are frustrated that they don't get more from their vendors, and they know they have to do it themselves. So in terms of upskilling, I would tell a lot of people who are working in corporations, don't look to vendors for the solutions. Frankly, help your executives, mine your operational data, your customer data a lot better. So, yeah. Sorry, I think that's a perspective that a lot of vendors don't want to acknowledge, but it's a reality.
Yeah.
I think that the CEOs and other C-level people are also inclined to want to say, I just want to buy this solution, and surely someone has it and I can buy it from them. And I think you're right, Vinnie, that it's you got the blinders on, imagining that someone has this just ready to go for me and it's on a platter. And the answer is probably no. There's probably, the reason you're in business is because you do something well and probably a bit differently. You're going to have to do some engineering.
Yeah, Paul, what about you? Agree, disagree? What are you thinking?
I'm going to agree and disagree, respectfully, of course.
It depends, right? It depends.
Go back to what Andrew said about automation. Automation and AI, mutually exclusive, inclusive together. I've seen automation projects go really badly wrong. The data is not ready. The team are not even trained. They're just thinking incoming invoices, which are read by OCR, and no one knows what to do with them from there. They haven't got the goods to sell. We're not, and when we move forward to what Vinnie said about getting information from your vendors, your standard vendor is only there to sell you more licenses, more product. They're not actually there to educate you. They'll have a lovely bunch of slides to show you, and they can talk to them all day long. But if you dig under the hood on that at all, you're going to find that there's not much. So we need to take a great deal of care. It's a massively powerful tool, and it's nowhere near where it's going to be in the next 12, 24 months. So, just taking a bit of time, maybe step back, take your foot off the pedal a little bit, understand what we want, use cases, how are we going to use this, how are we going to apply it. And again, what you said, Donald, about going to the shop floor and impressing people. Well, I'm going to take away the drudgery work from you. And you're going, wow, I can actually do my real job. If I've got an AI tool in place. So I'm arguing pro, for, and against in the same sentence.
Good transition, Paul. I think because we also want to look at it from the bottom up, right? We've talked about the executive. So where do you begin trying to educate from the bottom up with regard to AI, and where do you start? How broad do you go? What makes sense?
Take their pain away. Look at the top pain points. If I can improve your life, if I can take 10 minutes out of every hour out of every day, and you can get home on time, that's a plus.
Yep.
Yeah, if you're spending 30 minutes a week going through logs of some sensor, if you're doing like you had a digital twin of your production facility, and if you said, look, just find any temperature readings that were out of normal, that's the kind of thing that a neural network could go do, and that a LLM could help set up. And you're like, if that saves, an hour a week for everybody, no one's going to be like, oh no, I loved going through a spreadsheet with 44,000 lines every week. Everyone will be happy to have that taken care of for them.
John, one of the things that, automation hit me when I was in an Amazon warehouse. And, they have keyboard robots running everywhere. They have sensors. They have conveyor belts that miles and miles, right? But what really hit me was when somebody said, we redesign the work. We take the work to the person rather than make the person walk miles in this warehouse and carry heavy loads, right? They completely redesign the workflow. From a low level, from the bottom up perspective, the more you can show people, guys, we have rethought the whole process and we've taken this drudgery away from you, I think the better you will find acceptance. A lot of times you just give them the use case and say, let's do it. And so it tends to be, let's continue what we're doing, just quicker, right?
Yep. Donald, any thoughts on a bottom-up approach to data literacy, AI literacy?
I think it's fundamental. I think, in fact, it's actually really critical to take this approach. And one of the things that we have to remember about the workforce, if you like, in the broadest terms, is that they're going to become literate about this with or without our intervention in business. People are just going to be absorbing this. People are already, kids are already using this at school. People are already using this at college. They're going to be coming out of educational institutions into the workplace expecting to do this. It's like self-service, and it's like bring your own device. We are not going to be able to resist this. It's not about us having strategies to enable AI. It's actually about how are we going to cope with the wave of AI that's about to hit us. Vinnie's sitting there waiting for a hurricane about to hit him in the next couple of days. There's a hurricane coming for us in industry, and it's an AI hurricane, and we are not in control of it. We can go out and buy some tarps and buy some, make sure we've got some candles and supplies, but that's our strategy. We have to be ready for this wave that's about to hit us. So yes, we can have a bottom-up strategy within a business today, but the world is going to present us with a bottom-up strategy, and we've got no choice but to be ready for it.
This is one of the first shifts in technology where I had family members that don't know anything about technology, and every time I've tried to explain to them about data and analytics, they look at me as if I'm the clueless one. And this is the first time that people started coming up to me and wanting to talk about generative AI and ChatGPT.
Exactly. My wife never talked to me about ETL, but she talks to me all the time about AI.
Yes.
It also, to Donald's point, it also exposes how dysfunctional companies are. You'll see something spectacular from them, and then basic stuff they are screwing up. They're making us re-enter stuff. They're making us do things in paper and so on. So I think companies really need to look at things from a total process perspective, more customer inwards, right? And that's going to be a big opportunity.
Anders, what's going on there? I can see you got something on the tip of your tongue.
I do, and it's related to what Donald was talking about with the self-serve and the education. And the thought that occurred to me was, do we have what I might call like a junk food problem here? Everyone knows how to cook, if you only learn how to cook junk food, that will be bad for you, and then you bring those habits with you for the rest of your life. If you only start using AI to cheat on papers in college, does that, do you bring that forward? Not the cheating part of it, but just sort of the laziness aspect of saying AI can do all my thinking for me. Is that going to be a pro? So how do we teach people to consume healthy AI in their training? I don't know, Donald, if you have any thoughts on that, or if that resonates.
Oh, it's really difficult because the quality of this is so complex, and how do you determine the quality of good AI is actually going to be really difficult. And I suppose to a certain extent, the market will decide that. What is acceptable quality of AI will be decided. I think it's very difficult for us because the standards are moving so rapidly that I think it's very difficult to be prescriptive about this. This is going to settle over a period of years, but just now we're in a very dramatic period of disruption. It'll settle in a few years. So I'm trying not to get ahead of myself and worry too much about this. I might worry about it in a few years if it hasn't settled down.
All right. How about a final word for our listeners? If you could leave data leaders with one word on AI upskilling, what would you say to them? What's something that they can write down and pin on their desktop? Let's start with you, Paul.
Right. So I'm going to make an assumption here. Most of us, probably all of us, learn to drive. Someone taught us how to drive. Do we expect people to learn AI on their own? Shouldn't we take the same approach, going, I need to get you in the car and show you how to drive this beast? And if just a little add-on, another thing I read during the week about a secret calculator, the hack that allows ChatGPT to work on a T184, enabling cheating in exams. So the invigilator in the exam can think you're just totting up some numbers while you're actually able to use ChatGPT on a calculator. That's worrying.
Scary thought to have these adolescents driving AI, right? So yeah, I love your analogy. Anders, how about you? What's the final word for you?
I would say iterate, which would be a progressive rollout, and start with the most obvious spots within your organization to say, let's get these guys using AI, have them get some experience, because that is going to expand their imagination. So when you go to the next group of people, you're like, all right, we thought it was just this. In our first group, it expanded to these other use cases, which we found were very good. Let's bring what we learned there to our next group. So integrate and progressive rollout, I think.
Awesome. And Vinnie, what's a check you would write for the audience that they can take to the bank in cash?
Well, so I mentioned that I'm about to release a book called The AI Analyst. It's actually a fiction book. Okay, it's about an analyst like me who used to work for an automation company, and the CEO of the automation company disappears. Now, this guy has worked with the FBI before, so he gets embedded in the FBI investigation. And they go through scenarios that the CEO abscond, has he been kidnapped, and if he's kidnapped, what are the suspects, and so on and so forth. Now, you would think this would be a great example of something I could use ChatGPT for. No, I went and got myself a co-author. She and I have written the book, and honestly, the point I want to make is, when it comes to imagination, human beings are going to lead machines for a long, long time. So know the limits. The machines are very powerful, but know the limits would be my summation, if you will.
Very nice. Very nice. And Donald, you get the final word. So,
gosh, my final word is engage people. Engage people. You must engage the people who are going to be most effective, and don't assume that we can take a top-down approach and work this out ourselves as experts. We need to deal with the people who are most affected by it. So let's end on that. If I have a last word, my last word would literally be people.
Beautiful. The human side of AI. How important is that? Well, thank you guys. What a great conversation, great insight for all of our listeners. Thoughtful disagreement, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely want to thank everyone again. And John, thank you for moderating. I wanted to come back in at the end of the show here to wrap things up and give each of you an opportunity for some quick self-promo, whether you wrote a book you'd like to plug, a Twitter feed, a podcast, your company solution. The floor is yours, and we'll let our moderator go last. So we'll start with Vinnie.
Oh, thank you. So I've written 9 business innovation books. I mentioned I'm doing a fiction book, which is coming out in November, called The AI Panelist. I have a video channel where over the last couple of years, I've had several different guests present on different perspectives of the whole AI phenomenon. So everything from GPUs to LLMs to use cases and cost payback, cost and benefit analysis, and so on. And I'm also an analyst and advisor, and I have my own company called Deal Architect. So a little bit of a bio. I tend to do a lot of things, very few of them well, but keeps me honest. Thank you.
Thank you again for participating. Appreciate your time, Vinnie. Paul, over to you. What would you like to plug?
So we're working with AI. I might have come across as a bit of a negative nanny there with my AI piece. Not at all. I'm just emphasizing caution. But we're working with AI to speed up the implementation of ERP, and it's very exciting right now. Really watch this space.
Excellent. Sounds good. Donald, what about you? Where would you like to send the audience?
Oh, so I blog, I write books and blogs and things like that. But the best way to engage with me, come to my website, treehivestrategy.com, and have a virtual coffee. You can sign up 15 minutes. We can chat about anything you want to talk about, AI or anything else in the world. I've talked about everything from knitting to art to AI to poetry to philosophy. But just book a 15-minute virtual coffee, and we'll have a great conversation.
Love that idea. Thank you, Donald. Appreciate having you on the show. Anders, over to you.
Sure. Well, I'm with Alox, which is a full cloud online ERP, especially for industrial distribution. And the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. Very simple to just Google me over there. And Alox.Online, our website for that. So see you there.
Excellent. And last but not least, our moderator. John, any place you'd like to send the audience?
Absolutely. Come on over to ferraroconsulting.com. I definitely always try and provide a unique perspective on what's going on in the data analytics AI space. So you can find me there, follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll pretty easy to find me there by my name. And I just want to say too that I'm about to start a brand new podcast called The Digital Analyst. So excited to be doing that with Solutions Review and Inside Jam. Stay tuned. It should be coming out in the next few weeks here. And we'll be really focusing in on digital transformation, the next kind of phase of it, which is digital dominance, and how your AI and data assets take you there. So look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you, John. And I definitely appreciate the plug for our companion programming here on the networks of Insight Jam and Solutions Review. If you'd like to dive deeper into this topic, we encourage you to visit our growing community at insightjam.com, an always-on destination for all your technology needs and research. And while you're there, you can connect with some of the experts from today's panel. John, Anders, Donald, Paul, and Vinnie, thank you again so very much for your time. And of course, thank you for your attention. If you'd like to watch any more of our panels, please make sure to subscribe to the Insight Jam YouTube channel or visit Insight Jam on LinkedIn. And please stay tuned for our Insight Jam live event happening this December 10th through the 13th. 4 full days of live programming, keynotes, panels, discussions. You don't want to miss it. It is going to be a big event, and we can't wait to bring it to you. Until then, though, thank you very much for your time and attention, and we hope to see you next time. Have a great afternoon.